If your acrylic paintings look dull or flat, the first thing I would look at would be the type of paint they are using. These are craft paints that you could buy at an art supply store or a big box craft store. And I use these to paint this still life here, and the colors themselves really aren't as vibrant as what I'm used to. The surface also has a very matte finish to it. Overall, it doesn't really create such a vibrant look. For comparison's sake, here's one that I completed using student acrylics from Liquitex. There's more contrast in this painting and the colors look more rich. There is a gloss varnish on here, I'll talk about that later, that does affect the colors somewhat. But overall, I would say that these colors look better. Here's a painting that I completed using Golden Open Acrylics, and those are professional acrylics. And here's another recent one where I used fluid acrylics from Golden. I have two types of craft paints here. There's these ones from Kelly Art, and then these are the ones from Craft Smart. These are much cheaper than professional acrylics, and that's for a reason. To make them more affordable for hobbyists and students, they don't use as much pigment and they use less expensive pigments. My assumption is that they add more fillers to these paints. Some of the colors look like they have white added to them, which makes them look a little bit tinted and not as vibrant. So if you're using these paints, you might want to upgrade to a student acrylic. And I'd recommend getting one from a brand that has a good reputation. Liquitex has Liquitex Basics. And that's what I used in this painting. This is entirely painted with Liquitex Basics. Winsor & Newton has their Galleria line of student acrylics, and these are pretty good too. If you're going to switch brands, I wouldn't get a generic student acrylic because they might be a lot like these craft paints. You want to stick to a brand that has a reputation among artists. Winsor & Newton, Liquitex. Golden doesn't make student acrylics, but you could buy the professional line and then extend it with gloss medium or gel mediums to make it go further. These are swatches that I made with craft paint, student acrylics, and professional acrylics. See how this purple is so much lighter than the purple in the student line and the professional line? That's because they don't add as much pigment, and like I said, I feel like there's a little bit more of a white base in this. You can see the same in the blue. This is a much lighter blue than either of these two. These are the Kelly Arts. I think they're a little bit more vibrant. The orange, you can see there's a big difference there. And then this is the professional orange right here. I'm trying to keep this simple, but if you want much more detail, you can check out my course about acrylic painting supplies for beginners. I paint these swatches and I compare the different types of acrylic paints. I'm currently offering it for free. There's a link in the description below. You might think it doesn't matter knowing which pigments are used in your paints, but there are two basic types of pigments. There's traditional pigments and modern pigments. Here's a brief list of some of the different types of pigments. The traditional pigments are mineral-based. Some examples are burnt sienna, burnt umber. The modern pigments are more transparent and vibrant. So you have the quinacridones and the phthalos and other colors here. I'll do a quick comparison just so you can see the difference. I grabbed a bunch of different pigments. These are modern on the left, and these are traditional on the right. I'll quickly make a few swatches, and you can see the difference between the two. I'll start off with phthalo green. I'll add a little bit of water to spread this out. This is a very vibrant green. So this green is much more vibrant than if you were to mix like ultramarine blue with yellow. Phthalo blue-green shade. Phthalo blue is a very vibrant color. If you're not careful, it can totally overpower your painting. Ultramarine blue is one of my favorites. It also leans a little bit more towards magenta, so it's good for making purples, or you can use it to make a dull green when you mix it with yellow. It's a nice shortcut for mixing a natural-looking green. These are my two favorite shades of blue. I use them all the time. Dioxazine purple is probably the most vibrant purple that you can use. Look for the related videos section in the description for my other videos about purple. Notice how dark dioxazine purple looks. It almost looks like black when you squeeze it out from the tube. You'll notice that there's a difference between the way a color looks when it's really thick like this and when you thin it out. Mass tone is when the color is piled up like this. When I thin this out, it becomes a much more vibrant purple. That's a point I'll make in the next section, is that transparency can help with vibrancy. I'll do one more modern pigment, and that's quinacridone magenta. Magenta is much more vibrant than if you were to mix red with pink. Those are two different colors. I have more in-depth tutorials on how to mix different colors, such as purple, browns, natural-looking greens, and so on. Now for the modern pigments. This is cobalt blue in the fluid acrylic line. It's the only version of cobalt blue that I have in acrylics. It's still a pretty decent blue, but it's not quite as vivid as like the phthalo blue. The traditional pigments have a bunch of earth colors, and those are handy, but they're not quite as vivid as a modern color. They have their uses, but you just keep in mind that they look different. That's yellow oxide. It's not really a vivid yellow. It's more like a brownish, beige, mustard color. Burnt sienna is one of my favorite earth colors. It has a lot of uses. I tone canvases with it. You could use it to mix different shades of brown, and you can even mix black from it. Burnt umber is another good earth color. Although I would say that the burnt sienna is a little bit more versatile because you can always add like ultramarine blue to the burnt sienna to make it this dark. Burnt umber is more of a dark chocolate color. There are vivid traditional colors. The cadmiums are one of them. There's cadmium orange, red, and yellow. The cadmium orange is more vibrant than what you can mix from yellow and red. The traditional pigments do have vivid colors, but I would say the majority of them are more like these earth colors. The basic idea here is if you want the most vivid pigments, I would first look at the modern line of pigments. There are some more vibrant colors in the traditional line, but it's often these newer, more modern pigments that are really vibrant. There are some colors that are mixtures of different pigments, and it might be a mixture of modern and traditional pigments, so it's not always a hard and fast rule. In the previous section, I pointed out how dark dioxazine purple is when it's applied thickly like this. And I'll apply some of that on the paper. It's really dark. On screen, that almost looks like it's black. If I add white to this, it lightens it up and you can see that it's purple. I'll apply some of that next to it. Now if I wash out my brush, I can try applying it transparently. Previously, I used water to thin it out, but you can also use a glazing liquid. This is the satin glazing liquid. I think I might actually try the gloss. And that's another issue is the surface sheen of the paint makes a difference in how vibrant it looks too. It's subtle, but it's there. I'll spread some of this out and just put a little bit of the dioxazine purple in there. This makes more of a pastel color, whereas this looks more like the vibrancy you would get from a watercolor. I'll quickly demonstrate that with some other colors, just to give you an idea of how that looks. I'm using water this time just to make it flow a little bit easier. I'm doing the watered down version first because I don't want to get white into my brush. So I added white to the magenta, and it makes more of a pastelish pinkish color, whereas this looks more vibrant to me. You can use transparency with traditional pigments too. So I'll put a patch of burnt sienna down, and then I'll add water to it to make a thin wash. It's not as vibrant as if you were using a modern pigment, but it still has an effect on it. That effect might show up more with the modern colors because when I glaze the burnt sienna, it takes on more of an orangey color, where this looks duller. The point here is that how you apply the paint affects how it looks, including how vibrant it is. So the mass tone looks darker, the tint makes it more of a pastel color, and a glaze can make it more vibrant, like a watercolor painting. That's why watercolors can look more vibrant, is because the pigment is applied in a transparent manner. That affects the way the color looks. It's a lot like a stained glass window, it just looks more vibrant. The surface sheen of your painting can affect how vibrant the colors look. As I said in the beginning, this painting has a flat finish to it, and the colors aren't as vibrant. Whereas I applied a coat of gloss varnish to this painting, and the colors pop a little bit more. These are two separate examples, but I have plenty of videos where I varnish these paintings, and you can see how applying varnish to it makes the colors come out a little bit more. When the varnish is wet, the effect is really pronounced, but it's still there as it dries. That's something that you want to consider. You could use a glossier paint, but a simple way to solve that problem is to apply a coat of gloss varnish when you're done. It's typically what I do because I'd rather address that issue at the end of the painting process rather than adding gloss to my paint as I'm painting. One factor that you might be overlooking is the color scheme that you're choosing. It's a good idea to plan to have some neutrals in your painting, and that makes the brighter colors stand out. For example, in this painting, the majority of it are grays or neutral colors, and that really makes these reds and greens pop. It's not that this red is brighter than normal, it's just in comparison to everything else, it looks very vivid. Now imagine if everything in this painting was super saturated and bright. Nothing would really stand out. But when you pre-plan it with a color scheme, you can introduce neutrals in there just to make certain areas, such as the focal point, stand out more. Here's another example where I use neutrals in the background, and that makes the yellow and the blues stand out much more than if I had a bright color in the background. It might be counterintuitive, but in order to make a painting look vibrant, you need to include duller, more neutral colors. And then that way you can make the subject matter stand out by making it vibrant and more saturated. Up next, you can watch my acrylic blending playlist or my acrylic painting playlist. Thanks for watching.